30 years ago, the Beatles' fascination with the Hare Krishna movement brought it international fame. Once again, it's under the public gaze, and BBC One's Everyman is now back on the road to Hare Krishna.
Letchmore Heath is an island in the North London Greenbelt. But villagers complain that for years their Sunday tranquility has been disturbed. Visitors are coming to worship not at the church, but at a Hare Krishna temple. Over August Bank Holiday, 20,000 pilgrims came for a festival. After 20 years of wrangling and court hearings, the dispute between villagers, the temple and its Hindu worshippers is coming to a head. The conflict is a test case in the balance of rights between local communities and religious minorities.
I frankly do not like confrontation, and sadly that seems to be where we are headed at the moment, and that I think is worrying. And I would like to try and avoid that. However, that will be, I think, extremely difficult.
The Hindu community are considered peaceful and law-abiding, and over all the years of this dispute have certainly tried to use the democratic and legal processes, but been very frustrated at what they've come across. They are very aware of the types of motivations and attitudes which are behind this dispute. They do not accept it as purely a planning issue.
Let's try it all together. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. It's very good. Ishara Paramat Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam.
Vinod and Aradhana have chosen to marry in this temple because they're followers of Krishna consciousness. It's the British centre of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON, better known as the Hare Krishna movement. The temple is popular with the wider Hindu community who aren't followers of the movement, but it doesn't have planning permission for public access, and the local council has issued an order which, if enforced, would close it for public worship. The temple president, Akandadi Das, is leading the fight to keep the temple open to all.
In 1973, we asked to be a residential theological college in connection with the promotion of the religion of Krishna consciousness. That is our primary purpose to this day. We have never changed that. Of course, in 1973, it couldn't be clear to us, and certainly not to Watford Council at the time, that so many Hindus would want to also take part in the activities here.
While everyone repeating, you take some of the grains in front of you and throw them on the fire. Now there's a lot of grains there, so you can be generous.
Although public worship is a breach of its planning status, the temple has become a unique religious asset for many Hindus in a way that the white devotees hadn't anticipated.
The Hindu community are willing to accept not just ISKCON, but its Western-born converts, not only doing the teaching of scripture or the chanting of the hymns, but performing rites of passage, which could be birth ceremonies, weddings, or funerals for their loved ones.
This used to be Pigott's Manor. The Krishnas have renamed it Bhaktivedanta Manor. When Hare Krishna devotees in saffron robes first appeared in the village, they seemed more of a curiosity than a threat to village life. But as the manor became popular with Hindus living in North London, villagers were disturbed by the unexpected influx. The Letchmore Heath Village Trust became a focus for their views. 2 years ago, Philip Marsh reluctantly agreed to become its chairman.
My motivation as chairman of the Village Trust is purely the fact that I have been in this area all my life. It is an oasis, and I want to protect that oasis. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Krishnas wanting to develop their site, or whether it's the gentleman opposite who has a 5.5 acre orchard which he wanted to develop and we fought that and won, or just infilling perhaps in a neighbour's garden. I want the village protected from development, and I would like to think that in 100 years' time people will turn around and say, well, thank heaven, in 1994 the council and the planners had the sense to stop developing Letchmore Heath, because it needs to be protected.
For Britain's Hindu community, the local dispute has become an emotive national issue. The community usually keeps a low profile, but the threat that the manor might be closed to public worship has rallied huge support.
The Bhakti Vedanta temple has support from all Hindus for two reasons. One is that there is a temple, quite large, and many of us can go there and participate, and the pujas, services are carried on very well. Secondly, we don't have any temple nearby. If we want to meet for a huge congregation, we have to go up to Leicester. I don't think there is any temple of this size in the nearby of the London city at all.
More in sorrow than in anger, 5,000 Hindus demonstrated in London on the 16th of March, the day on which the council order came into effect banning public worship at the manor.
They don't close churches down or anything like that, so why are they closing our manor down?
I'm like this temple. I'm like this temple. No.
We want to worship and we want to know our rights, what to do with the God. No one believes that any other community would suffer like this. The government and the local council would never try to close down any other shrine or religious institute in the way that they have treated this temple. It's insane.
One of those who joined the march was Beena Vasdev. Neither she nor her sister Santosh had ever been on a demonstration before.
Are you alright? Yeah, I'm alright. Are you alright? Yeah.
Both me and my sister opted to go for the protest march.
Huh?
Well, it was a bit iffy thinking, oh, protest march, they're always very troublesome and so on. But when we got there, it was a very enjoyable day. It was very peacefully done, people reciting the prayers as we did the march. And I felt that this was very important to me. And I decided to do a bit of research on the manor and came to know in depth what the whole issue was. And after a couple of visits after that, I realised that the manor sort of gave you the sense of feeling that you were actually at a true Hindu temple, whereas you're used to the local one, which is just a very small temple.
The Hare Krishna movement was founded by Srila Prabhupada. He made it his mission to take the teachings of a 15th century Bengali saint to the English-speaking world. At 56, Prabhupada renounced his family and business responsibilities and went to America. He found a receptive audience, and today the movement has spread worldwide.
The Hare Krishna movement takes its initiative from Sri Chaitanya, who appeared at the end of the 15th century. At that time, he took India through the type of reformation that was happening simultaneously in Europe, where he drew the religion out of the temples amongst the people and taught that the scriptures say that the simplest way for everyone to worship God is simply by chanting his holy names, particularly in the form of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So at that time, perhaps the religion was held very much in the hands of the Brahmins in the Sanskrit language, but he popularized the religion in the form of bhakti, devotion to God, and made it something that was accessible for all people. And it was he who said that one day this chanting of Hare Krishna would go to every town and village in the world. Now, that was something that many of his followers perhaps could not even imagine happening. And perhaps it's now with the mass communications and ease of travel, or maybe it's a particular era of man, that prediction is now seeing some fulfillment.
In the late 60s, the Beatles' association with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi took popular interest in the teaching of the East to new heights. George Harrison met Prabhupada soon after his arrival in Britain in 1969 and began an association with the Hare Krishna movement. In 1973, he gave them the manor, and it became the Krishna's principal home. Built as a gentleman's residence, the manor had become a nurse's training centre. Applications to develop the site or turn it into a country club had been rejected, but the council confirmed they'd no objection to the Krishna's plan to use it as a residential theological college. The nurse's sitting room became a temple for the devotees. The movement is based on a tradition in Hinduism that focuses on Krishna as one of the faces of God and worships him as God. One of the earliest British converts to the faith was Rancho Prime.
For me, that's the same God as others worship in the Christian tradition or in the Jewish tradition or in the Islamic tradition. We're all worshipping the one supreme being. That being, for me, manifests as Krishna.
Krishna's name is at the center of every activity. Devotees are enjoined to recite the Hare Krishna mantra 1,728 times each day. This private observance has its public face in the chanting in Oxford Street.
We believe that the sound itself has a special quality, and it makes no difference at all if a person has an understanding of what's going on or not. The name of God is beneficial for everyone. It's not really aimed at converting people, it's just a way of sharing what we have.
Exotic appearance and elaborate rituals are the colourful externals of Krishna consciousness. But when converts decide to become full-time devotees, they also commit themselves to vegetarianism and avoidance of alcohol, caffeine, smoking, drugs, and gambling.
Those things are considered to be the enemies, really, of a life of devotion and service to God. We also practice celibacy, or else within marriage, sex is considered to be a sacred act, which is meant for producing children.
Monastic values are matched by a monastic daily routine. The first worship of the day is at 4:30 in the morning. It's followed by 6 more. The next at 7 o'clock, when the devotees also venerate their founder in the form of his life-size wax image. But the manor's innocuous beginnings were to be altered irretrievably by events in East Africa. In November 1972, the Ugandan exodus began. Most of the refugees were Hindus who had lost a prosperous way of life and arrived with little but their talents. Many settled in North London, and the manor became a magnet as a place of worship and an escape from their new beginnings in the inner city. A bond was forged, which has become a source of great strength to the Krishnas.
The support of the Hindu community in this country has become tremendously important to the Hare Krishna movement, and they have actually welcomed us, I think, in a most wonderful way, with sort of open arms and saying that we love the fact that you have been attracted to Krishna, and we want you to be part of our community. So they've accepted us as Hindus rather than us claiming to be Hindus.
Not this one.
Very, very similar.
The Krishnas have reciprocated by giving a warm welcome to visitors to the manor. Those who arrive at mealtimes are fed without charge. For the Krishnas, it's ironic that their difficulties with the village stem from the support they've found in the Hindu community. At the root of that support are traditions of belief and worship that overlap.
For white Westerners, this is a new thing. This is a new tradition they won't have seen before, or before its arrival in the late 1960s. So in that sense, it's certainly new to the West. But in terms of Indian tradition, the things that are valued in the movement can be seen to be valued in other forms of sectarian Hinduism.
There are so many overlapping traditions and sects within Hinduism that it defies any simple definition. The word Hinduism itself is more a term of convenience than a correct name for the religion.
The term is applied to one particular set of traditions in India, groups of religions that particularly focus on the worship of Indian gods and goddesses. But the term itself actually is a word which just means the people who live across the Indus River.
These traditions are several thousand years older than Christianity and refer to a series of sacred texts which are the sources of Hindu philosophy. They describe the main families of deities. One centers on the lord of creatures and creative power, the god Shiva. Krishna is in the family of the other main god, Vishnu. Both these are blue as the sky, symbolizing the universe and their divinity. Hindu traditions have found a home in Britain more easily than Hindu architecture. Most temples have to make use of converted school buildings or houses like this one. This is Beena's local temple. It contains deities in the traditions of both Shiva and Vishnu. She usually worships here once a week, but she and her family also pray daily at home.
First of all, we'd get up in the morning and one by one I'd have a little prayer, just asking the God to give us the strength to complete this day successfully. And then we all sort of set off to work, and then we come back, and then we usually have a final prayer in the evening, just thanking the God for this successful day we've had. My father passed it on to us, and I'd like to pass it on to my children. But it's not forceful. It won't be forceful. I would teach them and guide them and give them an opportunity to observe some of the rituals both in the temple and in the home. But at the end of the day, they would choose their route. Hinduism is all about a route to reach to one God, and it's their choice at the end of the day which route they would choose to reach the God. I mean, there's fears in every faith and every community that we're losing our faith with the younger generation, and equally the Hindu community feel the same fear.
While Bhaktivedanta Manor has a number of English-speaking priests, most Hindu temples have to rely on one brought over from India. Many of these lack the English to teach British-born English-speaking Hindus.
The temple issue has really worried the older generation, because the older generation feel that their own children and grandchildren are moving towards Western materialism, and it is religion that can make the children learn behavior, culture, respect for others. So the elder generation are very keen that the temples should be there, especially the Manor temple, and more temples should spring.
Work is underway on the first temple in the traditional style in Britain. It's been constructed in Neasden, North London, by the largest of the Hindu sects in Britain, the Swaminarayan Mission.
It is not easy to get a planning permission in this country for our Hindu temples. We are having a lot of troubles, more or less in every temple whichever we try to set up there. Some sort of obstacles have been put in there by the planning authorities. There are so many examples. We had this Swaminarayan Mission temple here in London. We have a temple in Crawley. They are having the same type of problems. Nearly 10 years we are struggling to get planning permission for a temple near Birmingham. And we try to cooperate with the authorities. Anything they objected, we try to put away with that one. But still, we're finding very difficult to get the planning permission.
Despite being a prosperous and well-organized community, the Swaminarayan Mission struggled for 8 years to find a site where they could secure planning permission. With this kind of experience repeating itself around the country, the Hindu community is becoming impatient with the planning dispute over Bhaktivedanta Manor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a meeting of the Bushy and Alderman Planning Sub-Board.
This council committee is responsible for Lechmore Heath. It's faced with a legacy of 2 decades of dispute since villagers first complained about the manor. Over the years, visitor numbers have grown. On Sundays, there can be 1,000 or more.
Item 1 on your agenda is the member.
On festival days, particularly Janmashtami, the birthday of Krishna, as many as 35,000 people have come over 2 days. Local councillors have been divided on whether to ban public worship or accept it as an unplanned development of religious practice.
For many Indian Hindus, the normal setting of their local temple will be an urban, inner-city location. So visiting beautiful sites is obviously an important part of pilgrimage activity in this country, and that's an activity that Indian Hindus are very keen to keep up.
हे भगवान हमारी जन्माष्टमी की यात्रा सफलता की होए.
Pilgrimage has been important in the Indian Hindu tradition since the time of the early epics, and Hindus are enjoined to go on pilgrimage. They're encouraged to do so, and obviously they're limited in what they can do in this country.
After taking part in the demonstration in Westminster earlier in the year, Beena and her sister Santosh were determined to take their children to visit the manor at Janmashtami.
For every Hindu person, it is absolutely essential to have a yatra, which is a pilgrimage. And this would be like a yatra for us. And then I think it's very important that, who knows what will happen next year. The manor may be no longer open to the public. And I think it's very essential that I give the opportunity to my children to experience something they would experience in India. So it is a yatra for us, a pilgrimage.
All over the country, thousands of Hindus are converging on Lechmore Heath as they make their pilgrimage to celebrate Krishna's birth.
was started, the Indian Hindu community was only beginning to develop in this country in terms of the development of its own temples. The first temple in this country, Indian Hindu temple, was only started in 1969. So the extent of interest in attending temples, in developing festival programs, in going on pilgrimage, that was not known at that time. That could not have been known. And that really what has happened is that the popularity of the worship has really developed in an incredible way that couldn't have been known.
It is because we are a college that the standard of worship on the shrine is maintained according to the scriptural standards, a standard which is not met in any other Hindu temple in this country. Being a college has created the problem, if you like. Now the real question is not to try and stop the pilgrims and cut them off from their shrine, but really how can we cope with this interest in a way that doesn't detract from the locality or from the lives of local villagers?
I think perhaps they've been a little naive. I think even they will say they were surprised by the numbers that were attracted. And I think it was perhaps naive for them to carry on as they were without making some official approach to the council or the village or whatever, so that we could actually sort the thing out at the very start, rather than let it get to the stage to which it has got now.
I feel that the villagers should sacrifice some of their comforts for this temple's sake, because it brings joy to many, many thousands. Not only that, the very Christian religion says that you have to respect others' feeling and allow them to have. I think local people can learn tolerance and keep quiet.
There are those in the village who sympathize with this view. Roger Hewlett is the dissenting voice among the 7 members of the village trust.
A few vociferous people have generated a standard viewpoint on the Krishnas, and it's become the accepted truth, and therefore whenever the situation is discussed, mainly what is heard is that their view about, there being a serious problem there, and that the only answer really is for them to be forced to go back to the original planning permission without any notion that, in fact, we've moved on, that they've lived there for 20 years, that during that time, by and large, there's been very little trouble, and that there is an alternative view in the village about it.
Numerous attempts were made by the council and the manor to agree the number of festival days and acceptable numbers of visitors at weekends and festivals. The manor even indicated it hoped to find an alternative location. But in 1985, the council began to move towards enforcement of the manor's planning status as a residential college on the grounds that agreed limits were being breached. The temple president believes the shift reflected other developments.
There was 2 families Hindu families who had purchased houses in the village. This created quite a furor among some persons who felt that property values were in jeopardy and that the village would be taken over.
When they did buy the houses in the village, there was a rumour, and I could say no more than a rumour, but it was a fairly strong rumour that it was their intention to actually take over the village. Now, far from being a worry about property prices, we were worried about the village being taken over.
I think that it would be a very unusual village if we could say there is no racial element to this question. Personally, I've not encountered much overt racial hostility, but I think the fact that they are Asians, mainly, who visit the temple, they are from a religion that most people in this village don't really understand. And they are seen by some people as outsiders or immigrants, and really they should know their own place. I think that has tended to cloud some people's thinking about it.
The manor appealed to the Secretary of State for the Environment against the council's ban on public worship and festivals like Janmashtami. On such occasions, the manor's grounds can accommodate the crowds. At Janmashtami, a circus tent is erected and a play is performed to entertain the visitors, as Krishna's birth isn't celebrated until midnight. After a public inquiry, the government gave the manor 2 years to find another site. This period expired in March, and the Krishnas appealed to the European Court of Human Rights. The court decided that planning regulations override freedom of religious practice, and the council then reminded the manor that public worship and the celebration of festivals like Janmashtami is now illegal.
Decided by my own sweet will. My mind is as fixed as the northern star.
When I discussed this with the president, I indicated to him very clearly that if he proceeded with Janmashtami, then that was leaving himself and others open to a prosecution. It was not, however, open to me to guide and advise him. The decision must be his. And equally, I had had representations from some of the villagers that they were concerned if the gates were locked. And of course, devotees would come into the village and would pay homage to the shrine on the roadside, and clearly that would have created difficulties for the police. But as things stand, technically the very holding of the festival is a breach of the enforcement notice, and we would need to determine the attitude and likely response of the courts to bringing a prosecution.
The Krishnas hoped to solve the problem by obtaining permission for a new road that would avoid the village altogether. It would cut through fields at the back of the manor and link it to an existing lane which provides a route to the main road. But the plan has only created new suspicions.
I think the real issue is this latest planning application, which obviously is trying to legalise, as far as planning laws are concerned, everything that they do.
We are not a very wealthy community, but the alternative that has been offered by the government is to build a new temple elsewhere. Imagine the cost of that. You're talking millions and millions of pounds.
I think that the road is a huge problem. The Christians will say it is the solution to all the problems. I'm afraid I believe it will bring with it other problems that we haven't even, or that perhaps the Christians haven't even thought about.
Residents of the nearby hamlet Patchett's Green fear that traffic would turn in their direction instead of going directly to the main road. Councillors for Patchett's Green understand the manor's importance to Hindus but oppose the proposal.
Well, I'm and my group are very strongly against the road proposal because we see it as a means of transferring the problem from the village of Letchmore Heath into the village of Patchett's Green. Happens to be an area I represent, and I know and I feel in sympathy with my constituents that this is not a proper solution.
When the council met on the 12th of July to discuss the manor's application for the road, they had to be brought by bus through a hostile demonstration. But the meeting failed to reach a decision. For 2 days, through the afternoon, evening and late into the night over August Bank holiday, traffic streamed through Letchmore Heath into and out of the manor. The Krishnas have appealed to the Secretary of State for the Environment, and there will now be another public inquiry to decide on the road. The council is due to meet again on the 19th of October. It will be presented with evidence collected on Janmashtami and will have to decide whether to take the Krishnas to court for holding the festival.
You have to be against public worship, because if you give public worship and no road, life would be absolute murder in the village. And the road brings with it other problems. If it were a theological college and a place of retreat, then 2 or 3 times a year to have a festival would not be asking too much of the village. So I'm afraid I feel that that is what it has to now become.
The shrine is here, the Hare Krishna temple is here, and discussions about whether it should be somewhere else or whether it would be best moved somewhere else are in that sense irrelevant. Bethlehem is where Bethlehem is, and it's no good saying, well, it would be much more convenient if it were on, handy for the M25 where more people would visit. The temple is here. It's important that it is here for people who worship there, and from my point of view that's the end of the discussion.
Midnight approaches. the moment of Krishna's birth and the climax of the festival. Patient pilgrims queue for a place in the temple. Beena and Santosh have managed to squeeze into the packed temple. They want this experience to be a memory as important for their children as for themselves. It's the realization of their pilgrimage.
I can't really see the manor closing down because it is a place of worship and everybody has the right to worship as they please, but the Hindu community is very much united and are willing to come across very forcefully if need be. They're holding back for a very positive outcome, hoping that it will be resolved peacefully.
I don't think anyone who has witnessed what happens here at Janmashtami time can fail to understand the importance of the shrine for the Hindu community.
I honestly feel that it's about time that somebody had a little bit of sympathy for the village, which has been here since 1299, and I'd like to see some sympathy sent our way instead of away from us.
If the manor is prosecuted by the council, this could be the last public celebration of Janmashtami at Bhaktivedanta Manor. The Krishna's request for the new road rests with the Secretary of State for the Environment. He will have to decide whether planning regulations and the views of local residents should override freedom of worship.